basically, this situation for myself started with a dream. And this dream I had one night about, I'm guessing, about 8 to 10 years ago. And in the dream, I thought I was dead. And I was in some type of realm that was extremely peaceful. I remember it being so incredibly peaceful. And I was in this very large, older house, and it was kind of like I was in a living room area or a work area that was very comfortable. And on the right-hand side, the sun was shining, and it was in the fall, and the leaves had tumbled down on the back lawn to these trees and they were multicolored, they were beautiful, and I had this vision where I could see out like a really far distance, and everything was in perfect clarity, and it was like magnified clarity, like the best, like a telescopic lens, and I could see clearly as far away as I wanted to. But I had gone back into and it was like these French doors, and I kind of went back in, and I remember that I was painting. I've been a type of artist, and I was painting on, working on this canvas, and I remember in the background I had this beautiful light, almost classical music rolling. And I was aware that someone else was there with me. I didn't see this person or this entity or whatever it was, but it was something that I was communicating with, and I was almost like a touring guide. And what had happened was that I started walking throughout the house, and then I went to the left, a little open hallway corridor thing, and it opened up into a larger expanse. And to the right, there was like this caged area. It was like a nice, very neat caged area full of household items and furniture and things you would need to have a home or live there. And it was all neatly stacked within itself and each other. And I looked to the right, and I said, that area was from a previous relationship that did not work out. And I remember kind of indicating that I learned a lot from that relationship. And then I took this person, entity, whatever it was, and I guided them to the left into the darkness a little bit. And above the darkness, it was like this movie screen. And basically, the movie screen started playing like this holographic type of thing. It was kind of like either a film or a holographic type of situation. And it was in my youth, like, in my 20s. It was in an apartment that I had lived in. And I remembered really liking this apartment a lot. And I remembered in the idea behind this apartment that this vision of memory had associated itself with in this explanation. And I remembered that I've always been a writer, and I remembered writing a lot on this dining room table in this nice little quaint apartment that was neat and clean, and it was a good place to be. I remember liking it so very well. And then what happened is like the expanse of memory took hold, and it was like all of a sudden I was flooded with these memories of being in other apartments across the city of sorts that was not exactly where I live today, but it was of the idea that I had lived in various places over time. And I remember specifically that there was this house on the end of a street, kind of like a little cul-de-sac. It was a dead-end street. And to the right, there was this really neat freaking wooden house. And inside the house, it was very, old school wooden panels, and the furniture was really kind of ornate and neat. And I just really dug this place for some reason. And I remember just really liking it there. And I just had this association with that. It was like a deep-seated conscious memory that, I remember being there. I remember being in this arena of existence. And then I don't remember anything more about the dream. And then I woke up and I remembered thinking, my gosh, that was just so cool that I had experienced that. And here again, this was probably, in my guesstimation of time, probably about 8 to 10 years ago. And okay, and so continuing forward in my existence today, that over the last, I'm guessing here again because I have no time frame other than my own personal intuition, is that over the last 5 to 6 years, what it started is that I started dreaming about living in these places where I would get up like in the middle of the night secretively, and I would go to these really cool casinos. And I would go there and I would feel this electric excitement inside of my body, where it was like a hidden secret thing where I would sneak off and I would go and no one would know where I was going. And it was like this really cool inner secret thing that I had going on. And I remember that I would go and then I would sneak back, and then that was kind of it. But I would go to these different locations of these casinos, and I remember one that felt like New Orleans or something like that because it was very old and ornate. And I went into this one where it had a lot of beautiful, slick, shiny brass and this red velvet type of background. And I remembered going upstairs and talking to the bartender like he knew me, and I was kind of like, give me the usual. And then I would meander around like I was some type of, like I was some type of secret prince or something. I mean, it was just nuts. And I remembered the one in New Orleans, and then later there was one where I was driving this really, and I realized I think it was a Jaguar, like a new, cool, ultra modern Jaguar. And I remember getting in this car and I was excited with this tingly energy I could almost taste in my mouth, as I was driving, and I was cruising down this interstate highway. And for some reason, I remember, I thought, okay, this is all speculation, that it was Boston for some reason. I mean, it was just like this cool freaking place where I not only worked there or was associated with work in that area, but going to the casino, it was like this whole memory game thing was all about secrets and about this secret life and the secret thing, and no one's supposed to know. And I was giddy with excitement about all of that. So basically what was happening is that I would have these dreams and I would forget them. I would just forget that I had dreamt these dreams. I mean, over time, I'm working a lot and I'm busy with my life and like everybody else, and I'm like, whoa, So you dream a dream, and it's kind of like that. You dream a dream. Well, that was cool. At the moment, you get up, you have your coffee, you get dressed, you brush your teeth, you get out on the work day, and you do your 40 to 60 hours a week thing, which is my scheduling, and you just live your life, and you have a family, and you just go on and on with everything. So that had happened. Okay. So what really, there's a couple of things that happened here in the last 2 years of my life. And basically, I don't want to get into too much personal information, but my significant other had explained to me kind of weirdly, as she basically had a pretty devastating physical ailment. I'm not going to go into it, but it took her a long recuperative period to come back around, and she's good now, which is great. And basically, once she kind of came back around and everything, things were a little different for myself and for her, and blah, blah, blah. And we got to talking a little bit, and I basically, about 2 years ago, started feeling like I didn't belong in that situation anymore. It was just like, I don't know if I kind of came to a crossroads in my philosophy or my personality, or how I was feeling about my own personal reality and things that were going on. But she had actually explained to me that, just kind of come out with it, is that I'm not the guy she married. I'm just not the dude. I'm not the guy that she married. And I said, okay. And, it was a good conversation. And she basically explained to me is that it was kind of like roughly in the year 2012 that I just changed. I just kind of like came home and I was different kind of thing. Just kind of boom. I was just kind of, and that was roughly 10 years ago from this date to now, And I kind of agreed with her, to be quite, open about and honest about how I was feeling. And I said, yeah, I kind of agree with you. I said I was kind of not feeling it anymore, or just not. I felt out of place. It was kind of like, that is kind of how I felt, like out of place. Like home wasn't home, and she wasn't who she was, and I'm not who I am. And, I thought too, I just got into my 50s, and I thought maybe it was a midlife crisis, to be honest. I'm trying to, speculate all the tangibles that can occur, with, getting older and life changes and all that stuff. And I was like, well, could be a lot of that. But then what kind of started really happening here about a good year and a half ago, or about a year ago, actually. This is October 2022. And all of a sudden, I was, laying in the bed, and it was dark, and I had this freaking dream again that I was in the Jaguar, and I was going to the casino, and I was proud of this sleek, beautiful, expensive sports car. It was 2-door Jag, silver. It was, driving 80, 90 miles an hour, and I was just like on top of the world, and I was just feeling it. I mean, I was just like the alpha sigma male going. I had made my money, and I was going to go have fun, and it was just like, bam. And that tingly excitement just was very memorable. And I was like, what in the hell is going on here? I mean, I really struggled with it. And I was like, this is just crazy that I would dream this over and over and over again. And I was like, what's going on? And I thought, well, maybe I'm, everyone's life is stressful. Everyone's got stressors. I don't care who you are, where you are in your life. Everybody's got stress. You know, we've had this COVID situation that's happened. We've had this, we've got internal strife with our government and social platforms, and people are on this movement thing, and people are disagreeing, and the news media, everything is just bad, and, it's just terrible type of time we're having right now. I think it is. And I was like hyper analyzing all this stuff, like, what is this? I mean, why are we making this turn? And it felt like a turn to me. It just felt like this turn that had happened. So I was like, okay, all right, it is what it is. And then, while I was still in my old residence, and I would come home and decompress, and I like to write a lot. I'm a writer as well, and I work a full-time job. I own a business, and all these things are happening, and I kind of decompress on a computer because I like to do screenwriting and fictional writing. And I kind of got my ambient music going. My headphones are on. I've got a couple of beers I'm getting ready to drink, and, this is always about 8 o'clock, 8 something at night. And I kind of was sitting there and hadn't even cracked a beer open yet. I hadn't even nothing. Okay, completely sober, completely aware of my surroundings, and completely everything. And all of a sudden, it was like these floodgates of memory just poured in my brain. It was like someone had opened a valve, and it's like all of a sudden I began remembering this alternate life that I knew. I knew this life. I knew who I was there. And I specifically remember this wooden house on the end of a street. And I remembered I drove a red Chevrolet 4-wheel drive pickup truck. And I remembered being in there in this home. I remember I lived alone. And I remember kind of always being this lone wolf guy. And I remember in the backyard the backyard kind of rolled down. It was summertime, and I remembered the neighbors having little scuffles about garbage cans laying out in the street. And I remembered that these next door neighbors, they had these dogs that basically were in the cages, and the dogs would get out on occasion and the neighbors would fuss. And I actually remember the neighborhood. I remember driving around the neighborhood where it was, and I remembered the slick grass from the rain, and you had to watch yourself. And then, I just remembered these damn memories that just flooded in. And I was like, and then I remembered that when I had this house, this sub-alternate memory told me that I also had an apartment. It was kind of like wherever I was stationed, like, okay, now you got to just kind of go with this because it gets a little weird, but I'm trying to explain it the best I can. Is that I'm going to use they, the pronoun they, assigned me this house. And they also assigned me like an alternate address for me to stay at times. And who they are is I really cannot explain that. It's just that I knew that my job was a weird, different job. And it entailed traveling. It entailed kind of like finding people, okay? And I was like, whoa, what is this? Because in this reality where I am today, I do not find people. I do not gamble. I'm like absolutely almost abstained from gambling. I'm not saying I have not been in a casino, which I have. But I'm like this really hyper conservative dude that's like, okay, we take $400. This is our entertainment for the weekend. And once we're done with spending the $400, if we blow it all, we blow it. because it's kind of like an allotment for like an entertainment, like going out to dinner or having drinks or, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of guy I am. I'm a very conservative person in this life. And I have to budget. I'm a manager as well, so I have to budget for business expenses and blah, blah, blah. So it was just mind-blowing to me that, number one, in this alternate life thing, is that I would be fascinated with any kind of gambling at all. Because that's not who I am today and everything. So these memories just flooded in, and it was crazy. Okay. Well, somewhere along the line is that and the weirdest part about this is that what has happened to me is that I have begun to remember what I have forgotten. Okay? That's the weird part. All right. So, I realized that along the course of the last few years is that I would have these really heavy-duty dreams. And I know now that I would dream over and over and over again, kind of like the same dream. But most of the time, I would forget that I had even dreamed these events that, and then, so in this one significant dream that I had along this timeline that I think that is an alternate life of mine in a type of reality is, I remember that I was in an airplane, and this was a pretty good size airplane, like a 747 or DC-10, something pretty big, okay, commercial airliner. And I remember inside the aircraft, there were 3 rows of seats on the right, 3 on the left, which is pretty big. And the color was like a medium blue, light medium blue. And I was talking to this woman, and I call her the blonde woman because I cannot remember her name. I cannot remember her face. All I can see is like this generality of a woman that was significant to me. And in my conversation with her on the aircraft, and she and I were the only 2 people there, it was kind of like, the scenario like this, is that all the passengers had left. The plane had touched down, everything was cool, everyone was done, and I don't know what my participation is actually with the aircraft. I do have a feeling, because I have been fascinated with airplanes all my life, and I almost went to pilot school when I was 26, and I kind of backed out the last minute, which is kind of weird. But I do have the actual feeling, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about planes and the dynamics and engineering and weird shit like that, is that I know how to fly an aircraft. I think that I was a pilot, and I've always had this yearning to fly. So I remembered while I was talking to the blonde woman that I had also been in a relationship with another woman prior to me meeting her, and the relationship had gone on for a while. And I remembered that the physical relations were good with this woman, and I remember I was a younger man and had more stamina and all that good stuff, and I remembered grappling with the idea, should I stay or should I go with this other woman? Now, this other woman in this life does exist. I know who she is, and she is an ex of mine. Okay? And the relationship did not work out, and it turned out horribly in the end. And I'm going to leave it at that. So, I remembered in that life is that what I did because of the contemplation, and I remembered almost staying with that woman, the other woman that really did exist that I know today. I said at the last minute, no, I'm going to break it off and I'm going to go with this, basically this blonde woman. So in this dream that I'm calling a dream, is that I remembered living out west somewhere, and I want to think like the desert, like Arizona or somewhere like that. And I remembered living in an apartment complex that was one level, I think it was. And I remember inside the apartment, I remember everything was kind of like a mauve, kind of a desert theme, a lot of carpet. And I remembered being inside. And I remember the bedrooms and the bathroom kind of thing. And I remember the living room area. And I remembered the kitchen area. And I remember outside through the windows in the parking lot that the kids had a basketball hoop. And they played basketball. And they kind of just hung out outside. And, you know, life was okay. I mean, I felt comfortable and safe, I guess. And everything was all right. And then there was kind of this memory of this, like a tent city kind of thing. And here, where I'm located in Virginia, we don't have anything like that. And I don't know how I would even know, because I have not been to Arizona, Nevada, Texas area. I have not been out there in this life. And I was like kind of thrown back in a way, because this blonde woman knew of someone that was in this, I'm guessing it was a tent city, but it was like a bunch of tents and some RVs, and they were kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And she had gone out there. Maybe she knew someone or something. And I think that I was in kind of a disagreement with whatever was going on or happening. I kind of remember a little bit of that inner feeling kind of happening. And then I have no more memory of the blonde woman. It was kind of like that part of that scenario just cut itself off, and it was just like done. And I was like, okay. And then I also have this memory of going back and seeing this ex of mine, and in this alternate situation, and she had this old farmhouse type of thing and a long driveway leading up, and fencing and ornate fencing and things like that. And it kind of was similar to the scenario in this world, but not exactly. And I remember going in there. I don't know why I went to see her. I don't know what the business was. I think it was a very short visit, and it was something of a business nature or whatever, but it was like she had this child, kind of like in the downstairs living room area, and she was very kind of artsy and like post 60s, 70s kind of beads and drapes and type of weird, you know, color, very colorful type of dramatic, you know, decorations of that sort. And it was by 2 stories. And I remembered seeing a cell phone. So that kind of tells me that it was probably some type of, within the last 20 years type of time frame of today. And I don't know what the background setting, but I do remember this very large fields and burnt grass that was up high, and kind of a little bit of a spooky type of atmosphere to it, a little bit of some sort, kind of distant and isolated and that kind of thing. So that's another distinct memory that I had, and it kind of shut itself down, and there was no more of that and everything. So as time went on in this reality here, in this present day, as of the last 6-8 months of my life, I began to actually begin to kind of like formulate this opinion that basically what has happened to me is that I'm either in connection or in some type of situation that I'm like, okay, and I will backtrack and say that possibly I've just thought that maybe I'm becoming mentally ill. I mean, for real. I mean, just no doubt about it. It's like I'm considering the possibility that maybe a portion of my own psyche has fractured and that have created this scenario on my own. I mean, I am full acknowledgement of that to the point where, about a year ago, or about a year and a half ago, because I wasn't feeling very good about myself, is I did seek what's a therapist. And I'm non-shameful about it. I think it was actually one of the absolute best things I've ever done for myself in my own life. And it has restructured my emotionality. It's restructured my idea about things that are acceptable and not acceptable in your life. And it has given me a lot of inner power to discover who and what I really am to myself. And I think it's one of the best things that I ever did. And basically, as of the last 3 to 4 months, I have been discussing this. Well, it started happening on and off, and then I would let it go, and then I would work on my emotionality for a while. And then, as of late, because I've gotten stronger and I feel a lot better about who and what I am, I was like, I want to work on this. I want to work on this alternate life idea that I've got going on, to where, what is happening to me? What is going on, in my life that this has occurred and has begun to occur. And, I am very open to suggestions and ideas as to possibly what is happening or what has happened, because I have no idea. I mean, I really don't have an idea other than some type of inner communication, knowledge base scenario to where I am trying to discover something about myself, or I'm trying to teach myself something somehow. And I also think that there are some others involved in this that I think I'm going to discuss in another podcast that's plagued me my entire life since I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I'm beginning to put a couple of these things together as to what has occurred in my life. And I would like to know from someone else if anyone else out there has had any kind of situation like this occur. I would really like to know that, Okay, so I'm going to go back to when I was still living in my previous address, and I was sitting in front of my computer, and I had brought in my couple of beers, and I was getting ready to write. And all of a sudden, I was sitting there, and this floodgate of information just kind of like downloaded into my brain, which was nothing more than just memory. Is that somewhere along the line, I have discovered that throughout that alternate life passage of time type of situation, that I was in Boston, and I remembered that I think what one of my jobs from this sub-contracting team of some sort, that's the only way I know how to put it, is that I was hired to do these various tasks. And I think that the tasks were that I needed to find people and I needed to gather information. and I don't know what that entailed. I had no direct knowledge base on my job was this or my job was that. I don't know. It sounds a little, I'm going to say it sounds a little, shifty, or, kind of like I was a spy or some kind of weird agent of some sort. It didn't sound good. It just sounds a bit bizarre, but, I'm going with it, because I don't have any other, anything else to do but just go with the information I'm given. So, I remembered in Boston that I would meet people, and I remember this place. It looked like a big wrecking yard. It looked like a big junkyard of autos and metal and like a recycling plant of some sort. And I remember that I had to go to this one building, and I met with someone, and I think there was an exchange of something or other. Okay, I do remember that. And then I remembered all the traffic and the cars, and there was a lot of hustle and bustle in the city. And I remember the overhead highways, and I was familiar with those. And I don't understand. It was like the interstate kind of got up and around and had large bridge posts that held the interstate up around the city. And here again, I've never been to Boston, Massachusetts. But I just kind of have this visual landscape that rolls in my mind with this. And as I'm even speaking this, I have these little snippets of memory kind of trying to unfold and unravel themselves, kind of like parchment, trying to lay out on a table, where these visions kind of start blending up and going. And I get these feelings in my emotionality here. It's like I feel what's going on there. It was very detailed and whatnot, and I either wish or I don't wish that I knew more. It's very hard to articulate, but I also know that I had to go to this hospital, and it was like I was supposed to either meet a woman there or I knew a woman there, okay, because all that's very, very vague. But I remember in the hospital, these stairs going up, you took a left, and you walked into this covered walkway corridor where there was a lot of glass, and the outside of the building was tan, and it was a major hospital in Boston. And I actually got on the internet because it was bugging me so much, and I actually found the place. I think it was the Boston General, I think it was. And I also remembered that I was allocated this apartment. Okay, this sounds weird. I remember that the landlady of the apartment, she was walking in front of me and came to the room. It was kind of older. And wooden door, opened the door inside. It was like an empty, vacant apartment thing. And I said, okay, that's fine. It'll work. And it was a very short, brief conversation. And then I do recall something about putting something in a wall, like in a vent or, weird shit like that. That I had this recording device or something, and it was my job to put it in the wall because somebody was going to come and retrieve it. I kind of remember that. And also within the Boston memory thing, because it feels like time shifts in that area, that I remember driving in this neighborhood of a hill and stopping the car, getting out, and it was kind of like a lower class neighborhood, to be honest. It was kind of like the low end. And talking to this guy, and here again, it's kind of like I'm looking at a film going on. And I'm kind of like the spectator in the film, and talking to him, he's going, hey, and I remember I was looking for this woman, and it was like she was hiding, but I found her. And then I don't remember any type of altercations or any type of violence, which I'm glad of. I don't want that to be. If it did happen, I don't want to remember it, or I don't want to be part of that, really. But here again, I'm just going with the information that was kind of like handed to me. And then I remember stopping along this river, and these guys come out. We talk for a minute, sharing information, and then poof, I'm gone. And then the other thing I kind of remember is like stopping into this like diner, bar thing and hanging out there, and then kind of meeting someone there as well. It was just kind of those type of scenarios, but it was kind of like, I remember kind of like knowing that I was known on the street, but I stayed really low profile. It was very important to me. And that's about the extent of the Boston thing that I can kind of get. So, here again, I'm kind of baffled about the whole thing. So I think I'm going to kind of close it down here now and, put this together and see, if I put it out into the world and see what happens. Okay. So, that's my story. So, I have more. I think I have I have a lot more information I'm going to put out there, but, that's it for now. I think I'm going to close it down and, create another part for this. So thank you for listening, and I do appreciate it. And if you have any, ideas, please share. I guess whatever platform I use this on, we'll figure it out, and I appreciate your time and thank you for listening.